Chargers go. Way to save the season to throw. Fire and down! It's blast down at the goal line by San Diego. Tomlinson off the left side. Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. I think they have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game.
What's up, good people? We are back. Jamie, Craig, back at you. Garrett here to give you our 53-man roster predictions, part 2, Electric Boogaloo. I don't know if we'll do one after Game 3, but this is what we got so far. I'm sure we'll try to sneak one in before they make announcements. But for right now, we're 2 games in. We got a little bit more clarity, at least more than before the preseason game started. There's also been some cuts, some players moved around. So we're going to talk about all that. And I think we should just get into it unless you guys got something you guys got on your heart that you want to share before we start. Anything?
I love you guys.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, that's what I wanted. Thank you. Thanks, Craig. And with that, because of that big show of love, Craig, which I appreciate, I'll let you start it off with special teams. I'll show love to you by letting you start with special teams. So here we are. Graphics are back. We'll just go by position, start with special teams, offense, defense. We'll see where we are. Punter, snapper, pretty much locked in. Who you got for the kicker?
I mean, it's pretty evident that Cameron Dick is the guy that they're rolling with. It almost feels like they're doing Dustin Hopkins a solid just because, like, he's a bit of a veteran and, you know, they want to give him every opportunity to show that what he can do. I mean, I guess if he's healthy, which has kind of been a weird thing that's been going on, but it's absolutely going to be Dicker. And for everything that he's been showing in the games and during practices, he looks like he's ready to take on the job and move forward as the Chargers' long-term kicker, which is great for a change.
Yep. I got the same thing. Sticking with the young gun, Cameron Dicker. It's nice that they have a somewhat kind of a kicker competition going on, but I think Dicker wins it out. It was admirable what Dustin Hopkins did last season, kicking on one leg, but I got them cutting the veteran, keeping Cameron Dicker, and of course, J.K. Scott and Josh Harris will make this team.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've got Dicker, Scott, and Harris making the team. I'm sure some of the coaches are fighting some tough emotions. I'm sure there's some strong ties to Hopkins. Like you said, after he kicked on one leg last year, I'm sure there are people in that building who want him to stick, and that's understandable. But I think Dicker winds up winning out. And I think it's kind of weird. You know, they went out of their way to cut Larry Roundtree early to, quote, do him a solid. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little weird that Dicker hasn't had that same opportunity unless, like Craig said, he just isn't fully healthy yet and they're waiting for him to nurse his way back, or they think they can trade him. It's just strange to me that they haven't already cut him because it seems obvious what they're going to do with Dicker.
Yeah, and there's so much like turnover in the kicker game right now in the NFL. A lot of teams could use a veteran kicker like Dustin Hopkins, who they might just get after cuts. But yeah, so what Jamie's referring to is something we shared in the Discord. Larry Roundtree was part of that whole running back competition. They were thinking about maybe keeping 4 running backs, if you're not counting Xander Horvath as a fullback, maybe keeping Roundtree. There was kind of discussion there. Elijah Dotson breaks out, and Larry Roundtree does not much in camp. And the team basically said, listen, we drafted you. We liked you. There's a reason why we drafted you, but it's just not working out here. We're going to give you the opportunity to try to stick on somewhere else in the preseason, because if they cut him later, there's probably no chance for him to really stick unless he gets swooped up on the practice squad. At least now they gave him an opportunity to try out for a couple teams. He ended up sticking with the Texans. They picked him up and they wanted to do him a solid so that maybe the Texans will be able to keep him as a roster spot or even get him on the practice squad. So yeah, that's what the Chargers wanted to do. They did it as a show of good faith in a player that they obviously liked enough to draft. And they knew he wasn't going to stick with the team for this year. why not give him a chance somewhere else? And they did. Good on them. Yeah, you'd think they'd do the same for a guy like Dustin Hopkins, who they liked and re-signed, but here we are. I'm sure we'll be able to he's going to get work somewhere else once he gets cut. But I think we're all in agreement here. It's Cameron Dicker, the kicker, J.K. Scott as the punter, and Josh Harris, the Pro Bowler, as the long snapper. So, speaking of sticking, let's move on to quarterbacks. Jamie, I'll let you go because here they carry 3 quarterbacks on the roster right now. Are they going to keep 3? Are they going to whittle it down to 2? What do you think?
I still think they keep 3. They always keep 3, and now the league has made it easier for 3. I was encouraged somewhat by Staley's comments earlier in the week. I think it was yesterday, the day before, when he basically said, hey, this is a different year. Yeah, we can keep 3, but it doesn't necessarily mean we'll do it this year. You know, with Duggan not getting snaps last week in the preseason game, it kind of gives me a little bit of hope, but I'm trying not to do that to myself because I know they're going to let me down in the end. So I think all 3, I just don't see them cutting somebody they invested draft capital in 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Craig?
Okay, so I'm going to say 2, even though I don't believe it. I really don't believe it. I'm trying to
don't do that to us, man. Come on.
I'm sorry, man. I'm trying to will this into existence. We haven't seen Max Duggan hardly at all. I'm sure we'll see more of him tomorrow. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, what has Max Duggan proven? Does he look like he can even remotely take an NFL snap and be somewhat successful? I'm not sure. So this is also kind of one of those things where I think it comes down to the game tomorrow and what he puts on display, because as of right now, he hasn't proven that he could really even be, I guess, a marginal quarterback for the most part if you were to get into a game. The way I feel is if the Chargers were to roll into the season and something were to happen to Justin Herbert, of course, Easton Stick is QB2, they're probably just going to look to see if they can possibly bring in a veteran. I just can't see Max Duggan getting in a professional NFL game and taking live snaps that count. So I'm holding on hope for that. I don't believe it's going to happen, but I mean, I have a dream. Dang, that was corny.
Yeah, well, no, somebody said that before, though. I think
a great man did say that, but
and that wasn't
unfortunately
corny,
for me.
it, yeah, you're not as cool as MLK.
Yes, and pertaining to this subject, yes, there's far less importance and relevance. But with that being said, a man can dream, and this is mine.
This is your one dream.
This is
man,
mine.
Your priorities are out of whack then if this is your dream.
I'm a Chargers fan, man. You got to understand. We have to take what we can get.
Let's talk about Super Bowls rather than not keeping a third quarterback.
Craig's getting ready to go on a cruise, and his one dream is Max Duggan doesn't make the
roster. I know.
When I come back, that's the news I need.
Well, yeah, I think you're in vacation mode. I got them keeping 3 quarterbacks too.
Craig has vacation brain.
So, yeah, already like senioritis almost, but he's already on vacation.
This is true.
Yeah, his brain's checked out. Yeah, I got them keeping 3 like Jamie. I think with Max Duggan, I mean, one, the draft capital is important, I think, and Jamie mentioned that. They've kept 3 quarterbacks, and that's been for a long time, as long as Telesco has been a general manager. But also, the NFL has made it a lot easier to keep 3 quarterbacks. You keep them in your 53, and they don't have to be part of the active 46, which makes it basically like a free roster spot. I don't know anybody in the Chargers organization that doesn't love a discount. And when you can get a free little roster spot, that's the Chargers way, baby. So I think they end up keeping Max Duggan. He's the 3rd quarterback. You don't want Max Duggan to see the field. Nobody does. Max Duggan doesn't even want to see the field yet. But the thing is if 2 guys go down like the 49ers did in the playoff game, you're going to want somebody who can at least somewhat pretend to be quarterback, and Max Duggan can do that. So Max Duggan is your 3rd quarterback. I think they're keeping 3 in the 53. They'll have him not as an active part of the 46, but he will be because of that 3 quarterback rule. So I've got them keeping Herbert, Stick, and Duggan.
So there you have it, folks. Max Duggan is somebody, and that's why he's going to stick on the roster.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, I love Craig's rationale. I agree with Craig's rationale in terms of why they shouldn't keep 3. But at the end of the day, I mean, Easton Stick is still here 5 years in. And how many years did we say he doesn't belong on an NFL roster? And he just stuck and stuck and stuck, and now here he is. So I would be shocked if they cut Duggan.
And to his credit, Stick has looked a lot better than he has the last 4 or 5 years. So here we are.
Well, at least for one game.
That's yes, against the beat up Rams team for sure. All right, next up here, running backs. I've got Xander Horvath on here. The list is Austin Eckler, Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller, Xander Horvath, Elijah Dotson, Tyler Hoosman, and Aaron Shampklin. Shampklin doesn't sound good coming out of my mouth. Doesn't matter. He's not making it. Larry Roundtree was part of this list. Obviously, this list is a little bit different. So the top 3 are obviously locked in. Austin Eckler is your starter. Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller, going to be sharing that RB2 role. I went back and forth on whether Xander Horvath makes this team. I've got them keeping Xander Horvath. He's the only fullback, and also he's played a lot on special teams. So for that, I think they keep him. And then does Elijah Dotson make the team? I thought about it, but I say he doesn't. I think they keep 4 from this list: Eckler, Kelly, Spiller, and Horvath. Elijah Dotson definitely makes the practice squad, and then maybe even Tyler Hoosman at that point. But for me, I've got them keeping 4 running backs off this list. It's Austin Eckler, Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller, and Xander Horvath.
Yeah, I agree. I have the same 4. And I think, Horvath, he doesn't just play a lot of special teams. He is a, quote, core special teamer. Mm-hmm. So that there's a lot of value in that. And I don't know that any of the other guys, Dotson, Hoosman, or Shamplin, have really established themselves to be able to do that. So I'd be surprised, given the emphasis they've been putting on special teams the last couple of years, if Horvath didn't stick. I went in thinking he might not when we did the 53 a couple weeks ago, just because I'm not sure how necessary it is in this offense to have a fullback. But I think his special teams value keeps him on. And in terms of Dotson, I really think the play here with Dotson is to not play him tomorrow.
Yeah, I mentioned that. Yeah, after the game last time. Yeah,
I think you don't play him at all. Don't put anything else on tape and try to sneak him onto the practice squad. I just don't think there's room for 4 like actual running backs plus a fullback. I don't think it makes sense with Kelly and Spiller both developing and showing flashes in the preseason. I feel like they're okay with 3, and they can probably get Dotson, and if they wanted to, like a Hoosman on the practice squad, just to get some extra depth in case somebody gets hurt. But their running back situation, I think, is much better than it's been in the last 2 or 3 years. I think it'd be a waste to carry 4 running backs as much as everybody loves Dotson. I don't think it makes sense from a roster construction standpoint.
Craig?
No, it's funny with this because with the running backs, I actually thought or went more with my head than my heart. I don't know how that work with quarterbacks and running backs and why that differentiates, but whatever. I have them going 4 also with Elijah Dotson, being the honorable mention odd man out. So Eckler, Kelly, Spiller, Horvath at fullback, also Horvath because of what he provides on the special teams. As much as I like Dotson, and I'm sure that they do too, which is why I hope they do exactly what Jamie's saying and, play a little chess. Keep him off of the field, because if he plays tomorrow and he explodes, then you're pretty much setting yourself up to lose him. So maybe they can get him onto the practice squad, stash him, and then, have him be a developmental guy and can look forward to the future with him potentially. But right now, just only see them going with the 4, and I think we're all in agreement there.
Okay. All right, let's go to tight ends. Craig, how many you got them carrying?
So I have them rolling with 4. Gerald Everett, Donald Parham, Trey McKitty, and Stone Smart. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that I know that they can't trust McKitty at this point. So that might actually work to Stone Smart's benefit. And I also don't think they're brave enough to cut McKitty because they invested a 3rd round pick in him. And the Chargers game, they're more than likely to hold on to a guy a year too long. And I just don't see them, having the gumption to let McKitty, walk. So right now it's those 4. I would not be surprised to see Smart get a little more burn during the season than what you would expect because McKitty's underperforming. And potentially, I don't know, maybe McKitty can get cut during the season. I'm not sure, but starting the year off, I truly believe that they go with the first 4 guys.
Going into this camp, I thought next year is when you're going to have a serious conversation about Trey McKitty. They're going to keep him regardless. And so I think they're going to as well. I've got the same for Gerald Everett, Donald Parham, Trey McKitty, Stone Smart. I think Hunter Campmoyer makes the practice squad. He was a guy that was on the practice squad last year. I think a guy that's probably going to stick with this organization. I don't think he makes the 53. But Stone Smart, I mean, has looked good in the preseason. He made the most last game. And I think because of the issues with Donald Parham's health and the consistency of Trey McKitty's play, which has been not consistent at all, you got to have some kind of backup plan. And Stone Smart has been that guy. Hunter Campmoyer hasn't really jumped smart at that point. And then Michael Ezike, kind of disappointing this camp. I thought that just watching him at UCLA was a little quiet, but flashed a little bit on tape, but just radio silence from him all throughout camp in the preseason. So a little bit surprised there, but yeah, I've got the same 4: Everett, Parham, McKitty, and Smart.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. And this is another one of those positions where Staley gave me some hope because, again, I think it was yesterday or the day before, he said something along the line. He was directly asked how important the preseason game tomorrow was for Mark Webb and Trey McKitty. And he didn't really give much of an answer except to say, yeah, it's pretty important. Like they need to show out here this week. Mm-hmm. I still don't think they'll cut McKitty. The only hope that I have here is Campmoyer showing some special teams value, and that could help him. The tackle he had last week was a huge tackle. Looked pretty good with the ball in his hands after the catch last week. Maybe I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. I'm trying to talk myself into it, but I can't do it because they're not going to cut a 3rd-round pick 3 years in. So for Everett, Parham, McKitty, and Smart, Campmoyer is kind of the odd man out, honorable mention, like Craig said. I'd love to see it just for special teams value and to show that they're actually evaluating these guys, but I don't think it's going to happen.
And really quickly jumping in, you know what's really scary about this? At this point, they don't even have a dependable number 2. I mean, we just assumed Donald Parham would kind of be a guy that goes into this year and, maybe steps up. I personally looked at him as a seam stretching guy, but right now, I mean, I would say his stock's probably got to be down. So that even helps Stone Smart's cause a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little scary. I mean, it's like we talked about when we did the 53 show a couple weeks ago, is they really don't have a number 2, and those 3 guys kind of combine their skill sets to form the number 2, and you really don't know what you're going to get out of any of those guys at any given time. So that could be reason to cut one of them, but I think it just winds up being reason that the Chargers use to convince themselves that they need to keep these guys and give them another year to develop. So
Can I change my dream over to Gerald Everett staying healthy?
No, you can't change dreams. It's like a wish. Once you put that out there, you can't take it back. There's no takes back.
I got more pennies I could go throw in the well, man. You can't.
Where?
It's not how
you
this
got a
works.
well nearby? You got one outside?
Actually, I live across the street from a creek. That counts.
No. That's littering. No. Throwing pennies in a river is littering. That's bad for the environment. Wishes only work in a well.
It's only us here.
No, you know the rules. Nah. Only wishing wells. You throw pennies in a well. That's it. Doesn't count. But yeah, I mean, we talked about it all off season. They needed to get better at tight end, and they did nothing to do that this offseason. It killed them in free agency. Now showing up to kill them in the draft, that they came out of there without a tight end, and they're a Gerald Everett injury away from being completely naked with no good.
Just say it.
There.
Fucked.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I guess somehow naked was better than fucked somehow, but whatever.
Lubeless.
All right. So
off the rails.
2 wide receivers. Moving on. Here we go. So wide receivers are on the roster: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston, Darius Davis, Joshua Palmer, Jalen Guyton, Keelan Doss, John Hightower, Darius Shepard, Pokey Wilson, Terrell Bynum, and Milton Wright. Jamie, how many you got?
I have them keeping 5.
Okay.
I went in thinking 6, and it could still happen, but I just don't think anybody's really distinguished himself as the sixth. I guess you could argue Doss, but my guess is they go in with 5, they carry an extra player somewhere else, and they wind up dropping that extra player when Guyton's healthy. Is how we wind up with 6.
So do you think Jalen Guyton starts off on the pup?
Probably. I mean, he hasn't really practiced since he hurt himself. I think he just got back on the rehab field this week. So he's probably still at least a couple months out, I would think, if not more. But I think, like we talked about on the after hours last week, obviously we know the top 4, Keenan, Mike, QJ, and Palmer. Darius Davis, I think, might allow them to talk themselves into only keeping 5. If he can be a gadget guy, if he can run some of those bubble screens, some jet sweeps, and he can just show the ability to open up the seam and make a play every now and then, maybe be a decoy as a field stretcher, they may not think they need 5 until Guyton comes back, or need 6, until Guyton comes back. So for right now, I'm leaning they should keep 6, but I think they're going to keep 5.
I've got the same. Sorry, I don't mean to jump in here, Craig, but yeah, I've got the same thing, and I've got the same idea. I think Jalen Guyton starts off on the pup. I think it's the same 5: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis, Joshua Palmer. I think if Guyton starts off on the pup, to me it feels like Keelan Doss is the next guy. He probably, if you look at his tape in preseason, you can make an argument that he earned a spot in that's 53 as a 6 wide receiver. Then I think it's John Hightower who showed up. It's like a tier. Keelan Doss. Next tier is John Hightower, who hasn't showed anything in the preseason, but was, a highlight reel in camp, which I'm sure is important. And then it's everybody else in a whole nother tier. I don't think Shepard, Wilson, Bynum, or Wright have done anything to even be in the conversation. So for me, I think it's in terms of the 53. Now I know that maybe Pokey might, land on the practice squad or something like that. But for me, it's the top 5 and then Jalen Guyton on the pup. And then Keelan Doss is kind of that odd man out who could be on the practice squad. But outside of that, I don't think Hightower has done enough other than maybe being like a backup kick returner, punt returner, if you needed one for some insurance, but they don't need it for the 53. So I've got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, Joshua Palmer, and Darius Davis.
So I went back and forth on this. And initially I rolled with 6 because I thought there was a potential for John Hightower to make it only because of this. And I think you might have actually just mentioned it, Garrett, for the additional special team support. When you look at the returners, if you're only rolling with 5, you have Darius Davis, and then who are you going to throw out there as your secondary returner? Is it going to be Josh Kelly? Like, who's that going to be? Mm-hmm. But I couldn't stick with it. I ended up rolling with the 5. Same guys: Keenan, Mike, Josh, Quentin, and Darius Davis. Guyton being on the pup, I'm not sure with the length of time it's taking him to recover from this injury. I'm not sure what Jalen Guyton is going to be back. And if his main claim to fame is speed and he has somewhat of a debilitating knee injury and it's taken this long to heal, I'm not super confident in it. That could also sway the decision that they make with regard to keeping 5 or 6. But for the time being, I'm just going to say 5. And it's because of what Darius Davis has shown here in the preseason. He probably accelerated what the Chargers expected from him thus far. So he's shown himself to be more than just a return guy, and you can use him in the passing game, not just as a gadget guy, not just someone you're going to be running jet sweeps or dump offs to. You can get him the ball in the intermediate, get him running some out routes in the middle of the field towards the sideline, and then work him deep. I would love to see him, if he plays, which I'm sure he should tomorrow, working down the field just to see what that looks like, seeing him stack cornerbacks, get on top of them, and if he can get the ball over the top. If he proves a little bit more tomorrow in any play that he gets offensively, then they'll probably solidify the fact that they'll roll with 5 as opposed to 6.
I'm going to throw one other name out there. I doubt he makes the 53, but he's probably got a shot at the practice squad, and he's kind of going under the radar, and that's Terrell Bynum. I thought Bynum actually played really well in the Rams game. He was open a lot, but they were giving Stick half field reads, and he happened to be on the half of the field that Stick wasn't looking at. There were 2 or 3 plays where he was 5-10 yards deep behind the corner, and had a chance to score touchdowns on big throws, and Stick either didn't see him or it just wasn't part of the read. And then he made 3 or 4 plays last week, including that prayer that Stick threw at the end of the game. So he's a guy who he's kind of flashing in the deep part of the field a little bit. And if they're unsure about their ability to get the ball deep, maybe they think he can do that on a smaller role. But he's a guy I keep my eye out for, certainly for the practice squad. I think he's been playing better than people realize.
As a practice squad guy, you're saying?
Yeah, mostly as a practice squad guy.
Yeah. And I know in the chat, everybody's talking about how they don't approve of Guyton and don't like him. And we have been toting that for years now as that one-trick pony who doesn't really get open all that often.
It's got to be a little worrisome for the team too. He got hurt in the Jaguars game? When was that? Like October of last year?
Yeah.
It was early in the season.
Yeah.
And guys who had similar knee injuries later in the year are already back.
Yeah.
And he hasn't even started practicing yet. So
yeah.
You kind of got to wonder what he's dealing with. To be just now getting back on the rehab field. I mean, there's got to be something going on there.
Yeah, not ideal. All right, so let's move on to offensive line as we wrap up offense here. We'll start with tackles. The list is Rashawn Slater, Trey Pipkins, Foster Sorrell, Zach Bailey, Matt Caskey, and Austin Pleasance. I've got them keeping 3. Pretty easy for me. Obviously, Slater and Pipkins are the starters. Foster Sorrell, I think, has been the best of this list. Austin Pleasance not being anywhere near good enough on the field. So I've got them keeping 3 here.
I have them going with 4, actually. So I'm throwing
a minute. Let's go.
Yeah.
But okay. I know where he's going with it.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So we know that the top 2, Rashawn Slater and Trey Pipkins, and you got Foster Sorrell, but then there's also Zach Bailey, who I think he's been kind of playing between he played a little guard last week, right? So
he's only played guard the first 2 weeks, and they've been working him at tackle this week.
Okay. So I think because of what we've seen so far from the backup tackle situation, including Foster Sorrell, I would not be shocked that they hold on to Zach Bailey and kind of slot him in as a right tackle, just because what we've seen thus far from some of the names that I shall not mention because nightmares. Zach Bailey might have an opportunity to make the team just for that purpose. And I think from what he's shown in the gameplay, the gameplay that he's had in these first few games, that he might be a viable asset there because we know who isn't. And I think it's just, to me, it just makes sense to hold on to him because behind, your top 2 guys, it gets really ugly in a hurry. And Foster Sorrell hasn't shown me anything, even as like a swing tackle, to feel confident enough to just roll with 3.
So I also held them keeping 4 players on this that are listed as tackles, but I don't think one of them will technically be kept as strictly a tackle.
Okay.
So I think in terms of tackles, they're keeping Slater, Pipkins, and Sorrell.
Okay.
I think with the news this week that they've moved Pleasance inside and they've moved Bailey outside, and we've seen Bailey play guard the first 2 weeks of the preseason. I think they are looking for an excuse to keep Zach Bailey. I think they're trying to give themselves a reason to keep him. I think it's more likely that he's kept as more of a utility lineman. He'll probably be listed as a guard on the roster when it's announced, but with the flexibility to kick outside, a lot like a Jordan McFadden. So that's where I think they're going. I think Bailey winds up sticking, and I think he sticks as utility lineman, probably listed as a guard with the flexibility to kick outside.
Okay. Yeah, I've got Zach Bailey making the practice squad, but okay. All right. So you guys keep 4, so I know where you guys are going. Craig, we're going to interior offensive line now. How many off this list of Zion Johnson, Corey Lindsley, Jamari Salyer, Jordan McFadden, Will Clapp, Brendan Hymas, Isaac Weaver, and Johari Branch? Are you having them keep?
All right, so I have them with 5. You've got Zion Johnson and Jamari Salyer as your left and right guards, respectively. Jordan McFadden as the left guard. He might be a swing inside guy also. and 2 centers, Corey Linsley and Will Clapp.
Okay, Jamie?
I'm in the exact same boat. I've got Zion, Linsley, Salyer, McFadden, and Clapp. I think Hymas is the odd man out with the way that they are moving Bailey around on the right side of the line. I feel like I think they have enough guys who have the ability to kick inside. You know, McFadden could technically be trained to play center long term if they want to go that route. Salyer could play center if they want to go that route. There's even been talk of Zion potentially being a long-term center. So there's lots of options there. And I don't feel like Hymas has done a whole lot in his 2 going on 3 years here to justify keeping him at this point. So that's the direction I think they go.
Okay, so you guys jump from Johari Branch to Zach Bailey here on the second 53. All right, well, so I've got those same 5, but I've got Brennan Hymas as my 6th here in the interior. So Zion Johnson, Corey Linsley, Jamari Salyer are the starters. Jordan McFadden as your backup guards, and you got Will Clapp as your backup center. I've got them keeping Brennan Hymas. He's the veteran. He's been with the team. He's kind of on the cusp. I went between him and Zach Bailey back and forth, but I went with the familiarity with Hymas, even though he hasn't proved all that much. I feel like they keep Hymas and then they stash Bailey. So we differ on the interior guy here. I've got Brendan Hymas and you guys have Zach Bailey. All right. Defense. Craig, moving from one interior to the other. Interior defensive line. Go ahead and read this list off. Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox, Tito Obonia, Scott Matlock, Nick Williams, David Moa, Christopher Hinton, Gerard Clark, CJ Okoye, and Terrence Lang. And before we start, for this exercise, we went ahead and put Tito on the PUP. He has not been approved to play yet, and his outlook for week 1 is probably not good. So we're not going to include Tito on this list. So, Craig, who do you have them keeping off this?
Okay, so my interior defensive line list is a little hefty. I have them going with 7. And the rationale behind this is, well, first, let me read off my 7, of course. So you got SJD, Austin Johnson, who just recently came off of the PUP, Morgan Fox. Nick Williams is on here. And because of something that I heard Khalil Mack mention during the week, he was given really high praise to Nick Williams, not just as a leader, but someone that he feels like can perform well in the defense. And when he was asked and that name came up, it kind of threw me off a bit. But I mean, if one of the leaders on the team is touting him, then I feel like that has to mean something. You got Scott Matlock, Christopher Hinton, and of course my guy Gerard Clark. Otito being on the PUP, I have Clark sliding in there because without Clark, then you don't technically have a true nose. And when I'm looking at what they're rolling at, I'm looking at going into the season in some of those early games, playing like guys like the Titans have strong running games. You're probably going to have to be able to mix and match your guys on the interior. And for that reason, I have Gerard Clark kind of bringing up the rear, but being someone who can definitely step in and be, a mountain in the middle of the defense.
Okay. Jamie?
I have them keeping 6. The first 4 are really easy. SJD, AJ, Morgan Fox, and Scott Matlock. I think those guys are locks to make the roster for a lot of reasons, obviously. The next 2, I think, are a little bit more difficult. I think there are 4 guys fighting for 2 spots there, and one of them likely to go to the practice squad once Tito comes back. So kind of looking at this, I feel like I haven't seen much from Nick Williams in the preseason. Moa, Hinton, and Clark seem like they've been on the field a whole lot more. Moa and Hinton have been on the field a lot in base defense. Last week, we saw Clark playing on 2nd and 3rd down and being used as a pass rusher to see what he could do in that regard. I agree with Craig. I think Clark is really the only true nose tackle on the roster. Even with Tito on the roster, I think Clark is probably the only true nose tackle. So I think Clark grabs one of those 2 spots based on the bonus they paid him, as a priority UDFA,
Mhm.
and based on some of the things he's showing as a pocket pusher and even as kind of a pass rusher, I think he sneaks on. That last spot comes down to Moa and Hinton. I feel like Hinton's been better in the preseason, and I'm going to go with Hinton over Moa for that last spot. And then I think when Tito comes back, they're going to hope to sneak Clark onto the practice squad.
All right, so I have 6 as well, and it is a different 6, which I love. So we know SJD, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox, Matlock are locks. So again, I've got 6, so it comes down to 2 spots. I'm with both of you guys. Gerard Clark, that's an easy kind of 1-for-1 swap if you want to just look at it, kind of apples to apples here on that defensive line, just trading out Tito, who's going to be on the pup, and then replacing him with Gerard Clark to help beef up the run game. I've got him as a 5, but I've got them keeping Nick Williams. He hasn't seen the field a lot, but they've been talking about him a ton in camp, and he's been getting a lot of the first team reps with AJ and Tito out early on in training camp. And I think that's because, and they haven't been playing him because they want to keep him long-term, and that he's already made the team, and they want to give these other guys a look for that kind of 6th, maybe 7th spot between Moa, Hinton, and Clark, and even Okoye. So I've got them keeping Sebastian Joseph Day, Morgan Foss, Austin Johnson, Scott Matlock, the veteran who's kind of versatile enough to fill in a couple different spots, and Nick Williams, and then the UDFA Gerard Clark. And I was going to mention what Jamie did. They gave Gerard a little extra cash to come over here to the Chargers. That's not a guy you cut in the 53. Now, it might be a guy that you keep, and then when Tito's off the pup, you cut and then try to sneak him on your practice squad, but not a guy you cut right away, especially when you give him that kind of money. And with the way, quite honestly, how he's performed, because he looked great last week as a pass rusher, and the first game, he had a couple run stops. So I think you're looking at like Hinton and Moa going to the practice squad from here if they can. Go ahead.
I'm going to throw one thing out there just because I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm just going to throw it out there for discussion's sake.
Okay.
And that is, I think there might be some interest in the room in trying to figure out a way to keep CJ Okoye through the initial round of cuts. And if they only keep 5 receivers and they're looking to hold a spot for Guyton, Okoye could potentially be a 7th guy that they keep just for short term until Guyton comes back. And he might be one of the first ones you cut and try to sneak onto the practice squad later. He's flashed several times in the first 2 games, and he's so raw, and there's so much to work with there in terms of size and athleticism. And I mean, the length is just absurd. His ability to close on people in adjacent gaps is ridiculous. So those guys don't grow on trees. So possibly maybe keep 7, go light at wide receiver and keep 7 and try to get Okoye onto the practice squad later. I doubt it happens, but it's a possibility.
Especially when they have that kind of the IPP here. Who was saying it? Ken.
Yep.
Where they can keep them on that. Is that what you're going to say, Craig?
Yeah, that's what I was going to jump in and say, because I guess with the IPP, he's designated, but he literally would have a set practice squad slot, but he doesn't play the year. So it's essentially like a redshirt year for him. So Jamie, you're saying this possibly with them having the intention or playing him if necessary, or would you rather him take a year to develop?
You mean take a year to develop on the roster?
On the practice squad.
Well, I think that's how it winds up anyway. I thought I saw earlier this week that even the IPP guys had to be cut in order to be placed on the practice squad, but maybe I misunderstood.
Regardless, I think it would be a really good story and a thing that they would, for one of those guys who had kind of earned it, to keep him as the kind of honorary 53 that gets cut later. That makes sense.
And he's been getting a lot of run from national media who watched the game, a lot of attention this week. So he might be hard to let go in that first round of cuts, but one of those, chess move guys who you hang on to and try to sneak out later.
All right, let's go to the edge. Jamie, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Thule, Chris Rumpf, Carlo Kemp, Ty Shelby, Brevin Allen, and Andrew Farmer.
This is easy. They're keeping 4. They're keeping the top 4, Bosa, Mack, Thule, and Rumpf. They actually have a pretty pretty deep group of backup edge players, and any two of these guys I think would be deserving of a practice squad spot. I like Kemp as an edge setter. I think he's really physical. He's flashed as a pass rusher the last 2 preseasons. Shelby's flashed a little less so, but you've seen him here and there at times. Farmer is a guy who's flashed in both preseason games. So I could see any two of those 4 making the practice squad. I think from a trait standpoint, Allen and Farmer are guys that you really want to keep and try to develop. But in terms of who makes the roster, it's easy. It's Bosa, Mack, Tooley, and Rumpf. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Craig, same 4?
Same 4. And you feel a lot better, well, at least speaking for myself, I do, than last year when you essentially had 3 and were kind of banking on Van Noy being an edge if you needed him. So in this scenario, Tooley and Rumpf have both flashed in the preseason, and they look like they're going to be solid contributors. Also, with regard to guys that can be held or make it to the practice squad, I'd have my eyes on Andrew Farmer and either Brevin Allen, possibly Carlo Kemp. I think there's a little bit more athletically to Allen than there is Kemp. So as much as I like Kemp with his size and what he can do with setting the edge, I think Farmer is pretty solid on both fronts. And so Allen is probably more of your prototypical like situational pass rusher where Farmer can do both. So I think that might not Kemp, but yeah, the top 4 are easy. And as far as the practice squad goes, I would love it if it ended up being Farmer and probably Allen.
Yeah, we're all in agreement here. The same 4: Bosa, Mack, Tooley, and Rumpf. You could probably make a case for any 4 of these guys in Kemp, Shelby, Allen, and Farmer, but I think those young UDFAs are guys that showed a little bit of something, not only on tape, but also during the preseason and in camp. So Brevin Allen and Andrew Farmer make some sense as some practice squad guys, but in terms of the starters and making the 53, it's Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Tooley, and Chris Rumpf. Moving on to linebackers: Eric Kendricks, Kenneth Murray, Dion Henley, Amin Ambagamiga, Nick Neiman, Tay Crowder, Nathan East, and Mikel Jones. I got them keeping 5. It's a top 5 there. Eric Kendricks is your starter. Kenneth Murray and Dion Henley are going to probably fight for spots next to Kendricks. Amin Ambagamiga and Nick Neiman are special teams guys, so they're making the roster. Tay Crowder is kind of an interesting guy they added late here who could be a practice squad spot, could steal a practice squad spot here. But Nathan East hasn't done anything this camp or this training camp or preseason, and Mikel Jones flashed a little bit last week, so he might have a chance at the practice squad. But I've got 5: Kendricks, Murray, Henley, Neiman, and Ogbongamiga. Craig?
Yep, same 5: Kendricks, Murray, Neiman, Ogbongamiga, and Henley. And I'm thinking that throughout the season, Henley sort of ascends and maybe more of a contributor on the defense as the year goes along. Right now, it just seems like we're getting a bunch of puff pieces about Kenneth Murray, so we'll see how that plays out. But Neiman and Amen are both core special teams guys, and Henley showed that he can create some havoc there as well. So those are the easy 5, and then probably Tay Crowder, possibly on the practice squad. He contributed pretty highly. I think was he with the Giants?
Yeah.
Yep.
So he showed himself to be able to play on the inside there pretty well. So I wouldn't be shocked if they hold on to him, but the top 5 are pretty easy to call.
Mm-hmm.
I have them keeping 5 as well. The one thing that's tripping me up, though, is the late signing of Tay Crowder. He's a guy who started, who, like Craig mentioned, has been productive and played at a reasonably high level. And you would think he could offer some special teams value. I don't think they keep 6, but signing Crowder heading into that last preseason game, I don't know. Something about that is ringing bells for me. I don't think they're going to cut any of the existing guys. Amen and Neiman are both way too important on special teams to cut, in my opinion. Dion, I think he showed enough on last weekend against the Saints that I think it's reasonable to believe that he's going to ascend that depth chart pretty quickly, at least in certain roles.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just really curious what the Crowder signing was about.
Do you think it's about a Blake Lynch injury? Which
Yeah,
I see
that's
is
what I was
not on
going to
this
mention.
list.
It could be, but they have two other guys who could fill those spots.
Yeah,
I guess, I could be reading way too much into it. It could just be as simple as they're not going to put Kendricks, Murray, Henley, Amon, and Neiman on the field this week, and they wanted 3 healthy linebackers to go out there and play. It could just be that simple, and maybe they think they can get Crowder on the practice squad.
But Crowder was a role player for the Giants, so it's not like they just signed a guy off the street. It was a guy who's a little bit better and probably a tier better than a guy you just pick as filler. I get it. There's something definitely fishy about this.
Yeah,
I love it. I mean, it's a quality signing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, with regard to what you have beneath some of your core guys there. So, worst case scenario, you have someone that if you were to get him on the practice squad and for whatever reason had to bring him up, you feel confident that he can, produce at least an average level within the defense. So, he's better than anything else you have beneath Nick Neiman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just. Yeah, the timing of it's just weird to me. And like I said, it could just be as simple as, hey, we need 3 linebackers to play on Friday, and we're not going to play our top 5 guys because they've already made the team. It could easily be that simple, but there are some bells going off for me that they see something in Crowder and they might be thinking about keeping 6 linebackers, which they did do last year. I mean, technically, Van Noy was
listed
the
as
4th edge and a hybrid linebacker, but they did keep 6, so there is a precedent for it. So it's giving me pause, but I do think they wind up keeping 5. That's my guess, and the same 5 you guys have.
Cool. All right. I don't know where we left off. Craig, why don't you start us off here with corners? I'll read them off.
Yep.
J.C. Jackson. Sorry, just for audio, I'll read it off. J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., Michael Davis, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, Matt Hankins, Michael Jaquette, Taiwan Mullen, Cam Brown, and A.J. Ozodinma.
Okay, so I have them rolling with 5. So JC, Mike Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., Jasir Taylor, and Dean Leonard. These are sort of your core guys. It's what they've been developing here since last year. It seems like they have a lot of faith in those back 2 guys with Jasir, who was in a quote unquote competition with Asante Samuel Jr. for that star spot, but not really. Dean Leonard is someone who's shown a lot of potential, someone that they believe in on the outside and has flashed a little bit in camp in the preseason also. So, they've put a lot of stock into those top 5 guys, and hopefully JC can come back and, at least work himself into, a regulatory role within the first few weeks of the season. If he's not ready to go out of the gates week 1, then you're looking at like a Michael Davis and Asante on the outside, and you can slot Jasir in there at star because you've already been giving him, reps there back and forth with Asante. So the top 5 are pretty solidified in my opinion.
Jamie?
I agree. I went into the camp thinking maybe keep 6 just because JC's banged up and you just don't know what you're going to get out of Jasir and Leonard, but I don't think they can do that. So I've got him keeping 5. And I think you're probably looking at Mullen and Brown making the practice squad is my guess. Both those guys have flashed. Mullen's been super physical for a guy his size, and Brown is just sticky, and he's been really physical in run support. He's been kind of all over the field the first 2 games. But I'm just not sure, like I said, that there's room for 6 corners. As much as I would love to say they'd keep Cam Brown because he's one of my favorite UDFAs in the class, I just don't think it's possible.
I got him keep 6 cornerbacks.
Wow.
So it looks like you're going to make it up here in the safety class, I guess, but safety group. But I've got them keeping 6. So top 5 are easy: JC, Zont, Michael Davis, Jasir, Dean Leonard. So for me, I think it came down to the last spot. Staley loves his corners. He's kept 6 every year he's been here. I think he repeats that pattern. I just don't see him going into the season light on DBs. So I think he carries 6. It came down to Taiwan Mullen or Cam Brown. Tywan Mullen's been my guy, and I think he had the splashier performance against the Saints, but I think he was kind of up and down against the Rams. I thought Cam Brown put 2 solid performances together, so I got him as the last corner spot as my 6th corner with Tywan Mullen making the practice squad. So I've got J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., Michael Davis, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, and Cam Brown.
I like it. I'm a big Cam Brown fan. I'd be thrilled if he made it. And I think keeping another, kind of bigger physical corner who can play outside and provide some run support, I think is important. Just because Asante and Jasir are a little undersized. And Asante is going to play outside at times, but I think having somebody who can, be on that island and press and be physical is an important part of the scheme. And it's something that they don't always necessarily have. So being able to develop that in Cam over the long term would be awesome.
I really like Cam Brown also, and for the same reasons, the physicality. And what I wanted to see from him during the preseason was something that he struggled with, was more off coverage here, and he looks like he's holding up well. Again, this is against the level of competition that a second and third team offense provides, but you can only play with who you're on the field with. So as a developmental player, I like the prospect there, and I don't feel terrible if for some reason he has to touch the field a little bit. Both he and Mullen have shown like tremendous chops from a physical standpoint and what they can do in coverage. So I've seen everything that I needed to see as far as the questions that I had about Cam Brown so far through a couple games.
All right. So, Jamie, I'm going to let you start this one off with safeties, which is Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, JT Woods, Mark Webb Jr., Raheem Lane, AJ Finley, and Tyler Baker-Williams.
I think they're going to keep 5 safeties.
Okay.
And I think they kind of need to. JT Woods flashed last week in the preseason game. He's looked better. But you still don't know what you're going to get out of him. I think Alohi is fine as a strong safety coming down in the box at times, maybe playing some split safety. Don't love him in single high. And as much as we all love Derwin, he's been banged up and he's had a hard time staying on the field at times. So I think you need extra depth. Raheem Lane is a core special teamer. He's going to make this team. He was all over the field against the Saints, making physical tackles in the run game. He flashed a couple times in coverage. He showed up repeatedly on special teams. He's going to make this team, not a doubt about it. I believe Mark Webb is also beginning to show up as a core special teamer. I think I saw the list of the people who were the starting special teamers in all the groups. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Webb was in at least 3 of those groups as a starting special teamer. So I think Webb makes it. Staley's talking about this being a big game for him, but I think they're invested in him. They've been waiting 2 years for him to be healthy and stick. And if he's able to play tomorrow and he shows up even reasonably well, I think he makes a team as a core special teamer.
All right. Craig, how many you got?
Got 5 also. So same guys, Gilman and Woods, Derwin, Raheem Lane, and Mark Webb. Raheem Lane is shown out to me a little bit here in the preseason, particularly in this last game. It's everything that Jamie spoke to. He's been extremely physical at the safety position, which is something you need. He's not afraid to come up and stick his nose into the run game, and he didn't look terrible in coverage either. And, for all of that, he's even better as a special teams contributor. Milk Carton Mark is hanging around, and you can tell Staley just has something for this guy. He wants him around, and also Jamie mentioned this as well. It's like it's a biggest tease. You see the size and the ways that you can utilize him potentially in a star role also as one of those DBs as opposed to just a safety, sticking the safety tag on him. And if he can be on the field and play even a little bit, makes a couple plays here and there, then he's probably just going to walk his way onto the 53-man roster. And I don't think it's a coincidence here that they've just kind of pined it out and waited for him for a couple years. And they're wanting to see the results from what they believe he can be just from an athletic standpoint and what he can mean as a bigger body that you can utilize to body up tight ends and also be pretty solid in run support. So I have those 5 guys.
All right. So obviously I'm light in this group, and I've got 4. Derwin James, Elijah Gilman, JT Woods, obviously making this team. I've got the 4th, the guy I kept last time in my 53. It's Raheem Lane. You guys all mentioned it. He's, after his performance the preseason, way he's played on special teams, he's shown up. He's a guy that is going to make this team. Mark Webb got injured again, and he's back at practice now, but it's the same old story. I don't know how we're replacing a guy like Derwin James who can get injured with a guy who is always injured. So I elected to go with the bigger corner that I think could contribute maybe on special teams rather than a guy that I can't depend on for anything. So I am not keeping Mark Webb, but I'm definitely keeping AJ Finley as a practice squad guy. And that's it. So the differences are Craig's got 2 quarterbacks. Jamie and Craig kept Zach Bailey. I kept Brennan Hymas for interior offensive line. Craig kept an extra defensive lineman in Nick Williams, Hinton, and Gerard Clark. Jamie and I both kept 6, but Jamie kept Chris Hinton. I kept Nick Williams. I kept Cam Brown as a 6th corner, and Jamie and Craig kept Mark Webb as a 5th safety. And there we go. All a little bit different. So we are going to be back here tomorrow after the game, which is a later game. So you guys will see us here right after the game against San Francisco. So we'll be here for after hours, and then we might just pop on here before the 53s get announced and give our last ditched 53, our final one. But that does it for us. I'm Garrett Sisti, Jamie, and Craig. Thank you guys, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.